After Peaches, Chapter 6, My Wonderful Impossible Plan. We must move away, I told Julie on Monday morning as soon as she opened her front door. The smile fell from her face and she stopped pulling on her backpack and stared at me. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. The owner of the house sent to my parents a letter. He wants us to pay more for rent. I tink. I looked up the biggest words in the dictionary, but we cannot pay more. My parents said now we must find another apartment. My words tumbled out before I could check them for mistakes, and I was too upset to care about anything but where on earth were we going to live. Oh, Julie said, pushing up her glasses twice. She stood there with one shoe on and the other off, her backpack hanging from one shoulder. But you won't move very far, right? I mean, you won't move away from Victoria, will you? I don't know, I said. My parents want to move closer to the farm, but I don't want to. Now, there is not enough work for Jose and some of the other Mexicans. So maybe later there will not be enough work for my parents. I don't want to live far away with no work. The words flew out of my mouth, mistake after mistake, piling up before I could even sort out what I was going to say next. Julie was ignoring the mistakes. We stood in silence for a few minutes. If you're near the farm, I could still visit you, right? She whispered. I mean, it's not the other end of province or anything. She looked as miserable as I felt, but at least one person in Canada cared where we moved, one person in the entire country. When we left Mexico, half the town turned up at our doorstep the night before with cookies and tortillas, pictures of saints, lucky charms, photographs, and even a Bible to bring along on our journey. Almost a year later, when we left Guatemala to come to Canada, everyone on our street threw a party for us. Now we had chosen to stay in Canada forever. We had been here for close to a year, and only one person will be sad to see us leave the neighborhood. Sometimes I thought no matter how much you want a place to be home, it simply doesn't feel like it. And that's when I thought of a plan, the wonderful, impossible plan. I wasn't going to say a thing about it yet, not to Julie anyway. We walked to school talking about the math test instead, and when we saw the other kids, I went quiet as usual, and she told me about her latest notes for her summer adventures. She didn't sound very excited anymore. In class, I made a few notes of my own in the notebook Julie had given me, but I wasn't writing about what I do this summer. I was writing about how to get my parents to agree to my wonderful, impossible plan. With Julie and Jose leaving, I had nothing to lose. Anywhere will be better than here for the summer. As soon as Papa and Mama got home that afternoon, I asked them what they thought. It's too risky, Papa said. Too much to plan in too little time. Too many things could go wrong. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his arms crossed. Mama was leaning back in her chair, looking exhausted. The empty supper plate sat waiting to be washed. I took a deep breath and was about to try again when Mama said, I agree with your father. We can't just travel across the province right now, following the harvest like the other Mexicans. They have to do it because they signed the contract. That's why we're here in Canada. But it's different here for us. Our home is here. We can't just pack it all away and leave it behind. But why not? I asked. Would Ricardo have backed me up if he were still alive? He used to do that sometimes, sticking up for me when he knew I wanted something really badly. Even though we didn't always get along, he was so much older than me, and we didn't have much in common. I missed him now. It would only be for a couple of months, I said, and it's perfect timing. I won't be in school in the summer, so I can help in the fields like I do on Saturdays. And Papa's been talking about exploring the province ever since we got here. And we have a car, and you two are really good at harvesting. And Jose said that farmers are desperate for help. Besides, imagine how much money Jose must be making if he can afford to fly back and forth to Mexico every summer. For some reason, they smiled at that, but they still didn't look convinced. Jose doesn't pay for those flights, Rosario, Papa said. The farmers do. I frowned. That didn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Because the farmers need people to harvest their flowers and fruit, said Mama, and Mexican workers need money to survive. It's hard to find work in Mexico, and people would rather leave their families behind and put food on the table than let them starve. But lots of Canadians need jobs too, I said. Why don't farmers hire them instead of paying for all those flights? Because most Canadians don't want to work so hard for so little money, Papa said, pushing back from the table. Getting up at 5 and working bent over for 12 hours a day? Most Canadians would demand higher wages if they had to work like that. But that's not what we're talking about. We were talking about why we can't just leave our lives behind and follow the harvest. Mama began clearing the dishes, and she motioned for me to help, as if the conversation was already over. I grabbed the knives and forks from the table and dropped them with a clatter onto the plates. Mama ran water in the sink, and Papa stayed in his seat because, with two other people moving around in the tiny kitchen, he had no room to get up. He stared at the vinyl tabletops as though it might solve all our problems. It's not so easy, Mama said as she scrubbed. First of all, we would need to find a place for all of our things. That costs money. Gas for traveling costs money. And where would we stay while we're on the farms? Jose and the others always have somewhere to stay because the farms give housing to foreign workers. But we will have to find our own spot. That would take time and money. So we'd still be no better off than we are here. But it doesn't have to be that way, I said, snatching a frayed pink dish towel from a hook at the edge of the counter. Julie's family has a big tent that they haven't used in years. Miss Norton said that we could borrow it whenever we want to. She said there are campsites all over British Columbia, and some only cost $1 a night. That's much less than rent. And the other great thing is that Julie has a big basement with plenty of space in it. We don't have much stuff, and I'm sure they'd let us keep it there if we asked. I'd written all this stuff in my notebook that day, and I was ready for any excuse my parents could think of. Ricardo would have been proud of me. No matter what, I was going to win this discussion. It was my only shot at a summer with enough normal Canadian kid stories for my book. If I wrote about all the places we camped, I wouldn't even have to mention that I worked with my parents during the day. Our few pieces of furniture and our winter clothes wouldn't take up much space in Julie's basement, and best of all, if our things were at her place, we'd have to come back here to live instead of going somewhere else. I wouldn't have to start all over again at a whole new school that might have even more Robbie Zecks than this one. And I wouldn't have to leave behind my only friend in the whole country. My parents looked at each other. They weren't disagreeing with me anymore, so I kept talking as fast as I could. We could travel all the way across, just like you said, Papa. First strawberries and raspberries in the Fraser Valley, later cherries and peaches on the edge of the desert. We'll meet all sorts of people and see a million places, and I'll help you in the fields every day. And after peaches, we'll be rich and we can come back here and choose any apartment we want, maybe even one in the big buildings downtown with a pool or a garden on the roof. At last they smiled. Mama even laughed. I think, she said, we'd have to invest in some new furniture if we wanted one of those fancy apartments. They wouldn't want lawn chairs in their kitchens and children sleeping on sofas. She was teasing, of course, and changing the subject. But she looked less worried than she had since we got that letter about the rent going up. So you'll think about it, I asked. Papa sighed. I don't know, he said. A lot depends on the charity of Julie's mother. I bit my tongue and shook my towel in a noisy thwop. I knew they hated accepting charity, but I also knew that they really liked Miss Norton and that she'd be more than happy to help. We'll think about it, Papa said finally, and I tossed my towel onto the counter and bounded across the kitchen to go hug him.